Night City truly is a place of great variety, substance, and style, and nothing in-game shows this off more than the vast number of vehicles to choose from. From insanely slick hypercars to the sturdy Mad Max-style Nomad vehicles, it's time to acquire and take every single car for a test drive before weighing up the pros and cons of each in order to decide in ascending order which is best. If you've been enjoying the series thus far, then don't forget to leave a like on the video and sub to the channel for more content like this. Now go grab yourselves a drink and get comfy for what will no doubt be my longest video yet. Ready? Good. Then let's get to it. Down at the bottom, we have the Mahir Supron FS3, a minivan which encompasses the necessity over style era known as entropism. This one just about fulfills its purpose as a vehicle by the skin of its teeth, so head over to the Arasaka Industrial Park area to buy it for 16,000 eddies from Muammar Reyes. That's one of the cheapest vehicles in this game, and with good reason. Reyes himself describes it as a pile of cheap crap, whilst the database says, quote, a guillotine combined with a meat grinder, end quote. Hopping in, I realize exactly what this vehicle is. Solar panels on the roof tell me this is a cheap and easy to acquire minivan for a weekend break in the Badlands. Selecting my scenic destination, then I head off for a couple days of relaxation. On the way, I experience the measly 110 horsepower, the van's inability to turn corners, and the pleasantly surprising top speed of 140. That's kinda useful until we need to slow down or turn. Taking it off-road, this thing gets even worse, and trying to cut corners and climb hills to my destination actually makes me think the engine is about to explode. Not so good when we've packed all our self-sufficiency items in the back and are now in the middle of nowhere. Finally though, we arrive, and the engine still works, miraculously. Time to unpack and... the doors won't open. That's a little weird because it did open earlier for me when I was loading my luggage. Well, holiday prematurely over, I don't even trust this thing to get me back to the city, and instead head for the nearest fast travel point. On the way, we're tripped up by trees, all the doors fall off, and in the end, I think it's best to put this thing out of its misery. TLDR, worst camping trip ever. Next up, the regular Thorton Galena is the cheapest to buy car in the game, and with good reason. Coming in at a very low 13k over in Little China, CDPR have gone to some effort to make this car deliberately crappy looking. And do you know what? I actually really appreciate the fact that there's a car like this. I complained back in the bikes video about the fact that the Badlands bikes didn't look rusty enough, that the designers had simply done a pristine quality model and left it at that, without making it feel like it had history as a part of that world. The Galena, on the other hand, has a ton of attention to detail, with an external rust issue and signs of damage inside too. Lore-wise, the Galena was the people's car of the 2030s. Built to be as cheap and affordable as possible, this car has cut every possible corner when it comes to quality. It sports a pathetic 86 horsepower and a top speed of 120. A really cool detail actually is how you can hear the engine audibly struggling upon approaching this speed. So why the hell would you buy one of these? Well, there's of course roleplay reasons, and the fact that you can inflict as much damage as you want to this one and it won't look any worse. Pretty much every other car has a pristine paint job, and driving the way one does in a video game will immediately result in scratches. It's also the car David's mum Gloria drove in Edgerunners, illustrating David's particularly poor upbringing. TLDR, deliberately bad pile of junk. Now we want to head over to this garage in downtown, and my, what an awesome place. There's loads in here. Outlaws, Turbo Rs, multiple Caliburns, and even a MaiMai. Too bad we're here for, well, this. The Villefort Columbus is a popular Night City transit van, and despite some pretty poor specs, it does at least come pretty cheap. For the mere 19 grand spent, we'll get 210 horsepower, a top speed of 132, and all-round terrible acceleration and handling. Now, of course, the purpose of this vehicle isn't to drive particularly fast or well, and it's still more than capable of ferrying cargo from A to B. In fact, before Dino sells it to you, he explains that it was literally used to smuggle drugs before, and might be harboring some exotic smells. Best open up all the doors and windows then, because the last thing we want is to get pulled over and searched, especially given the fact that there's quite a cool feature here to store unconscious or dead bodies. Now, I just wish that this could be a slightly expanded upon feature wherein we could maybe do taken alive bounties or something. The other good thing about this van then is the fact that we can jump on top of it for a small jump boost. But then there's taller vehicles out there which admittedly we can't own, but can drag off the streets when we need them. TLDR, something to stand on when you want to jump higher. You know, the typical American family car that you see in like every 90s and early 2000s movie ever? Average speed, plenty of boot space, doesn't appear to be anything special, but instead accentuates the fact that the people in question are a normal family with no particularly out there quirks. Well, meet the Thorton Colby, which I feel takes all of these things and places them in 2077. It's probably not a car I'll ever have to drive, and there are plenty of options leagues better than this, but were this not to exist in the game, it would feel like something is missing. It's slow to accelerate, only reaches a speed of 136, and has 182 horsepower. It also corners awfully, so classic American father had better be a very run-of-the-mill sensible driver, and of course he is, because the family film in question has literally no stakes or sense of threat when it comes to the driving element. In fact, the only time you see the car in films like this is when the family pull up to their new home and the roof is overloaded with luggage. Now, when I'm saying all this, do I have a specific movie in mind? I don't think so. I'm just going off of vague childhood memories. Or maybe I'm thinking of Breaking Bad. I don't know, maybe this looks like Skylar's car. Now, weirdly, it does require 25 street cred to purchase, but at least it only costs 18 grand. I guess its poor handling comes from the fact that it's a style over substance kitsch car, meaning all the effort has gone into making it fill the role of classic family vehicle with no effort spared for making it drive well. Still, if you want your V to play the role of classic mother or father, then this is the car for you. TLDR, kids, pack your things. We're going on family vacation. Now, the Archer Heller is our starting vehicle, which V acquires sometime between their Life Path Prologue and the Sandra Dorset gig. These were manufactured between 2023 and 2038, making them one of the older cars in the game. Being from the Entropism era, the car is designed to function well, but beyond that does precious little. And you know what? I think this thing's done a pretty good job. It would be well over 50 years old at this point and is still running with seemingly no problems. We do have that annoying stint with the Delamain cab after the heist, which if you haven't acquired another car before then can put you out of vehicular action for a bit. But even there, the Heller is repaired swiftly with seemingly little trouble. Inside, the layout isn't bad, with a comfortable looking interior and one of the few White Wolf bobbleheads we can find in vehicles. This of course is a reference to the Witcher franchise and suggests to me that this car is supposed to serve as the Roach of Cyberpunk 2077. A bit of lore behind this car then: back when they were made 50 years ago, the manufacturers apparently did too good of a job and created a car that evidently wouldn't die. The issue here being that many customers never had to buy another car again, with all their A to B needs sorted for the rest of time. Clearly, that's still the case for some in 2077. Now, of course, as the starter vehicle, we need to view this as the quality of car which CDPR decided would be entry-level tier. Aside from the Nomad life path, this will be your first taste of driving in the game, with the natural progression from here being that you'll acquire better vehicles and your driving experience will improve from here onwards. With 225 horsepower and a top speed of about 138, those are not bad starting stats. In fact, it's funny how this one isn't at the bottom of the list, seeing as it means your driving experience can get worse than your first time starter vehicle. Rather than seeing this as a negative though, I'm just going to view it as a great piece of world building on CDPR's part. Every previous vehicle on this list was more or less created not for the driving experience per se, but to flesh out the vibrant library of vehicles that we can drive past and own in this game. TLDR, if it's worse than this, you probably don't need it. Is it just me, or have smart cars reached the level now where they are simply too small? I mean, come on, there's literally got to be no crumple zone there. I might as well drive strapped to the front of the vehicle. Well, that's exactly the vibe that the Makigai MaiMai is going for. Buying this one over in Charter Hill for 22 grand, you may actually have trouble seeing it at first. And before you ask, no, it's not painted with army camo, it's actually quite a vibrant red. It's also, however, even smaller than the real life smart cars that I was just complaining about. I mean, seriously, any other car looks like a giant next to this thing. Hell, bikes probably look larger by comparison. This 100% has entropism written all over. Necessity to take up as little resources as possible is exactly what this thing's about. Well, at least the doors open upwards like the DeLorean, which is kinda cool, but if you think about it, that again is an action taken to minimize required space. They literally can't slide back as there's nowhere to slide back against. A pleasant surprise though was when I got this thing up to a speed of 100 138, though it does come with a warning not to exceed 60 when flanked by winds over 20. And to be fair, I imagine in real life it would probably blow away. Fortunately, wind mechanics of that kind haven't been programmed into the game though, so in this instance we can just drive as fast as we want, wherever we want. Now, whilst this thing won't exactly win you any races, it does just about match the speed of the starting Archer Hella, which interestingly makes it a reasonable alternative to what we start out with. It's kind of funny to imagine V as the most feared merc in Night City who then drives around in this, and if you want to do that just for the lols, then I really don't blame you. TLDR, size doesn't matter, it's what you do with it. Next we come to the Thorton Mackinaw MTL1, which Muammar Reyes straight up describes as a car that drives like a boat. Well, having picked it up for 33k from Arroyo, let's put that to the test. Starting off, I didn't find it too bad for a pickup, with acceleration happening at not too sluggish of a rate and reaching a nice top speed of 145 on the flat. However, being a pickup, I figured I should test how effective it would be navigating the trash pile wastes, since we'll likely use it to ferry our trash there at some point. It did not go too well. In fact, despite the alleged 420 horsepower, this thing was evidently incapable of climbing its way to a vantage point to toss our trash from above. So disappointed, I returned to testing its ability to merely navigate roads, before realizing it was pretty crap at bends as well. There was only one thing left that I could think to do. Since it had already been described as driving like a boat, I thought I'd check how well it drives as a plane. Surprisingly, pretty well. TLDR climbs hills badly, but descends them brilliantly. The vehicle of choice for every mob boss in Night City. Villefort's Alvarado Delegate is exactly what you'd expect a member of the Mafia cartel to pull up to you in before making you an offer you can't refuse. It may be slow to accelerate, clunky to turn with 407 horsepower and a top speed of 151, but none of that matters. This car is about making a statement. It's a big look at me, I'm rich and powerful and have 2 more wheels than I need. Sure, my back doors may serve absolutely no purpose whatsoever, but do I look like somebody who has to explain themselves? If you want to pretend that you're at the height of power and glory, then you can buy this one from Sebastian Ibarra in the Glen for a reasonable 39k after reaching 20 street cred. It was previously owned by a Valentino who fled town and was exactly the type of person I've just described. Obsessed with worldly possessions and big shows of power. Something probably helped by the fact that this car was also the poster child for Bushido 3, the Fast and Furious ripoff of the Cyberpunk universe. The game itself describes how you don't drive an Alvarado, but rather you cruise in one. Something you'll understand for yourself if you get behind the wheel of this thing. TLDR, I'm really cool, everybody look at me. Please. Up next, we have the Thrax 388 Jefferson. Apparently a great car destined for a great person. We'll see about that. I mean, Dexter DeShawn owned one of these, and that might be telling me everything I need to know. We can buy this one over in Wellsprings, right by the Hayward Ripper dock for 34k. It has 388 horsepower and a top speed of 151. It's also a neo-militarist vehicle, meaning it prioritizes packing in substance over style. This thing may not accelerate at breakneck speeds like the sport and hypercars of this list, but it is weighty enough to allow you to bully your way through the traffic of Night City, with barging people to one side being all too easy once you've built up speed in this thing. So the main selling points of this vehicle are neither speed nor style, but rather protection, with alleged bulletproof plating and glass protecting higher ranking officials from the dangers of city streets. Though attempting to drive it through some Arasaka soldiers soon proved this was a bit of a lie, and now it makes sense why one of these was owned by Dexter DeShawn. So its main selling point is a dud, and it accelerates slowly. Therefore, the only real benefit to this car for me was in its ability to throw its weight around. TLDR, the school bully who cries when you hit him back. Remember driving Homer Simpson's car in The Simpsons Hit and Run? Well, this is it now. Feel old yet? The Cortes V5000 Valor is another executive car with a whole load of bark, yet not so much bite. It costs a reasonably cheap 28,000 eddies and can be picked up in the Wellsprings region. They say it's pretty popular amongst corpos, so let's find out why. Well, much like the rest of these cars, it does indeed feel sturdy and powerful. No surprise there then, but let's try turning. This car is clearly designed for driving around more slowly and looking like the shit. It has 333 horsepower and a top speed of 151. A speed which is only really useful for driving on straights though, because again, this thing can't turn. Handbrake turns, in fact, are the worst idea because they literally turn into a 180-degree flip, which of course grinds you to a halt. Still, if you're a corpo roleplayer who's hoping to climb their way back up to that corpo life, or for that matter, you just want a car that reminds you of your childhood GTA equivalent, then this can be fun to drive sometimes. It also comes in a used but like new condition, having been the birthday gift of some trust fund kid who was never really interested in driving it. TLDR,
I am evil Homer. I am evil Homer.
the Thorton Colby might be the classic American family car, but remove the extended boot space and convert it to a pickup truck, and you're looking at a somewhat different and, dare I say, better car. It still won't exceed 140 in speed, but with horsepower increased to 235, you are going to notice a very nice difference in acceleration. I guess that's a combination of souping up the engine and removing all the family holiday luggage, though it's still not a scratch on sport and hypercars, obviously. With all-wheel drive now as well, handling is still not top tier, but a significant improvement on the regular Colby. I also tried this one off-road a bunch, and aside from the steepest of hills, it's not a bad contender for traversing the Badlands. Sure, it'll set you back a little more and can be bought for $25,000 in Rancho Coronado, but the extra $7,000 on the regular Colby is definitely worth it in my opinion. However, it's still not the best of the bunch out there, so you might want to think about saving your money completely and getting a red and white striped one for free during the Dress to Kill side job in Rocky Ridge. This film shoot was supposed to be selling the car as part of a rural beauty campaign, but things went ironically and disastrously wrong when the RAF and Shiv showed up. Very bad day for the film crew, not a bad find for you. Another thing to note is that Muammar Reyes sells you the green one on the basis that it's great for stashing bodies. Now, I did try this feature, and whilst technically possible, the ragdoll mechanics are a little realistic to make it a feasible endeavor, and there's no way to fasten and keep all arms and legs inside the car at all times. TLDR, snazzy looking pickup, favored by grave robbers. If you've played the best life path in this game, then no doubt you'll be familiar with this next one. The Thorton Galena Rattler is the car Nomad V starts with before even arriving at Night City. Now, let's not pretend, this truly is a better starter vehicle than the Archer Hella, and it's a real shame Nomad V had to get rid of it for the same car as Street Kid and Corpo V. Fortunately, this doesn't have to be permanent. As the side quest, these boots are made for walking, will involve venturing into the Badlands junkyard to retrieve our old ride. Once you've played past the quest Ghost Town, where we meet Panam, this quest will trigger not long after. Now, I can't say for certain if there's any level dependencies, but it didn't seem to activate for me before hitting 15 street cred. When we find the car, this woman named Lena will claim it's hers, and that if you'd cared so much, you wouldn't have abandoned it in the first place, which is a fair enough observation. We have three options here. Simply take the car with no real repercussions, give it to her, or pay 100 eddies for it. So I paid this woman a meager 100 eddies and told her to buy a new car. Not quite sure how she's gonna do that, since even that rusty old Galena from earlier was still 13k. But, you know, she seemed happy enough, so I don't feel as bad. Anyway, with 294 horsepower and a top speed of 166 as well, the Rattler is evidently worth way more than the regular Galena. And being a Nomad car, it's evidently kitted out for the Badlands. It's also one of the few cars in the game with a bobblehead, and truly feels like a special, sentimental vehicle. What's more, if you progress through the game in a certain way, it can once again function as your only vehicle for a time. If your Hella gets knocked out by the Delamain cab and you haven't acquired Jackie's bike yet, this is definitely one of the best and easiest vehicles to pick up once the quest becomes available to make sure you have a vehicle again, whilst you're waiting for the Hella to get repaired. And it's easily just straight up better than a bunch of the paid for vehicles in the game. Obviously though, its main weakness is that it's limited to Nomads only. A cool feature to differentiate life paths, but a real shame for street kids and corpos. TLDR, the superior starter vehicle. The regular Archer Quartz is acquired from up at the Ebonite docks for 31 grand, a much more agreeable price than its Bandit variant, which we'll get to later. That being said, it's without a doubt a worse car, with 220 horsepower and a top speed of 166. Though really, that's still not a bad car in the grand scheme of things. Now, a factor I'm noticing with the Quartz vehicles is their inability to take corners well. That's why, canonically, these things make up 2% of registered vehicles, but 17% of all road incidents. In real life, we have nothing near that percentage of crashes from one car, according to my research, with the highest rate I could find being Vauxhall, probably Corses, at 3%. Most likely enthusiastic new drivers with a little too much overconfidence. That's in reference to both the game and real life. Interior here is pretty basic, with nothing of interest to really get drawn into. It was apparently sold by an enthusiast to pay for his divorce fees. A bit sad, I know, seeing as he clearly loved this car, but from looking at the thing, it's nice to know it's been in good hands. We'll need 12 street cred before buying this one, and for the price, it makes for a decent mid-range sport vehicle, if you have the cash to spare. Again, just watch it on those corners. Losing control is way easier than it looks. TLDR, a future man's crashable boy racer car. Now, Emperor 620 Ragnar may sound like the gamertag of a kid who really liked Vikings, but it's also the name of a pretty nice looking SUV in Cyberpunk 2077. Available from the Corpo Plaza for $38k, the handling on this one is surprisingly good when we consider the weight of the thing, and it's got a decent 529 horsepower. However, the speed leaves much to be desired and clocked out for me at 124. It's a pretty common security vehicle among corpos, with a snazzy decked out one being incorporated by police in more high-profile situations. Whilst it may not be the fastest or the best, it certainly gives off to me some king of the highway vibes, with its size allowing you to throw your weight around and smash into other vehicles stress-free. The size of this one is also good for parking next to high walls for higher jumps. Definitely a vehicle worth having then for reaching those extra scenic viewpoints. TLDR, big car is big, but move well. Now, this next one is definitely a car for enthusiasts, but not so much for casual drivers. The Quadra Turbo R740 is a kitsch sports car manufactured between 2055 and 2074, and the style over substance definitely shows the second you start driving it. At 480 horsepower and with top speeds of 183, this thing actually appears very decent on paper. Try cornering in this one though, and it's just not going to work out as you expect. It takes but the smallest adjustment in this car to send you spiraling out of control. With that much power to screw up with, that is bad news. And for 69 grand over in Charter Hill, it's also on the expensive side. Maybe with a lot of practice behind the wheel of this one, you could eventually tame the beast. And on straights, to be fair, it still performs very well. Wakako actually implies that it'll get snapped up quickly, and there's no doubt it's a popular and badass car to be seen driving. The V8 engine, immense power, and the fact that it reminds me of older Lamborghini and Ferrari models scores it some nice pluses, but its difficulty to control is a problem that's tough to ignore in a vast ocean of vehicles to choose from. Not to mention the fact that we receive a vastly superior variant for free, which is obviously higher up the list. TLDR, drop dead beautiful car, which is also utterly crazy. I imagine most of you have completed the Beast in Me street races, so you'll no doubt be familiar with Claire's car Beast, a souped up version of the regular Mackinaw which is better in every way. Being a quest item, it's obviously free, but can be missed if you don't follow Peter Sampson and forfeit winning the last race. And whether you let the guy die or manage to save him, more on that in a bit, Claire will gift this beast of a car to you, claiming she no longer has any desire to race. It's got 560 horsepower and excellent acceleration for the size of it. The top speed is 164, which again is really good for a car of this size and way faster than the regular Mackinaw. But what exactly can it do that other regular cars can't? Well, unlike sleeker pickups such as the Colby Butte, this one comes heavily armoured and can survive a while longer in intense combat scenarios. And sure, whilst being in a vehicle is totally unviable for combat right now, vehicle combat is coming, and no doubt when it does, it'll precipitate something of a switch from fastest cars in Night City to a combination of speed and sturdiness. Beast then, whilst being just above average on speed, is way up at the top when it comes to armor. TLDR will be way more popular in the future. If you're getting a bit of deja vu roundabout now, then I don't blame you. The Mackinaw Saguaro is indeed almost entirely identical to Beast, but this one rather is awarded for completing all 9 gigs for Dakota Smith. Therefore, another free vehicle which we do need to work a little harder for before acquiring. In fact, I wanted to figure out if there was any difference between these two, which involved a short time trial drag race down by the Badlands petrol station. And I can indeed confirm that the two cars traverse the exact same distance in the exact exact same time. Why then am I placing the Saguaro above Beast? Well, there's two reasons. First, from a storytelling perspective, I feel less bad about driving like a maniac and trashing this car. It's a reward that I've earned and hasn't held any sentimental value to any of my friends. Whilst Claire gave Beast away to us saying she didn't intend to race anymore, I'd still feel bad for her if I blew that vehicle up. Sure, we can't actually permanently destroy our vehicles, but I think you get what I mean. Second reason I prefer Saguaro more, well, I just think the yellow bars are quite nice. Plus, we don't have to forfeit a race for this one. TLDR, battle-ready vehicle without sentimental stakes. Now, this next car is automatic, systematic, hydromatic. Why, it's the Villefort Alvarado Vato. And yes, it does very much remind me of the car Greased Lightning from Greece. Not necessarily in colour or even body shape, but rather in how it feels like the same kind of status symbol. The bulky open-top convertible, where the only real feasible way for passengers to get in the back seats is to literally hop over and in. If there were to be a few more musical numbers in Cyberpunk 2077, say a few more side missions with Kerry, I reckon this car would make an awesome centerpiece to some over-the-top song and dance number. What's more, this can yet be another of the free vehicles and is acquired from the Beat on the Brat match in the Glen. Here we fight Cesar Diego Ruiz, who makes the foolish decision of putting this beautiful car on the line. Winning the match, then we can choose to claim our prize or show some pity and leave it with him. Having something of a conscience, I left the guy with the 20k eddies I bet, but no way was I passing up this car. It is easily superior to the other executive Villefort vehicles, and I can't say there's another vehicle in the game that gives off the same feeling of overly showy to the point of being tacky. Gold is obviously a symbol of wealth, but when you make it the color of your car, it's like compromising on a more chic appearance in the name of showing off just how rich you are. It's style over substance, written all over. Even still, with 407 horsepower and a top speed of 152, it's not a bad car to drive, though easily eclipsed by others up the list. No, the main reason to drive this thing is either to show off in an overstated way, or else if you're just doing a playthrough as John Travolta. TLDR, go Alvarado Vato, you're burning up the quarter mile. You're not a true patriot of America unless you drive the Type-66 Gen Rowley. That's Gen Rowley, but is supposed to sound like General Lee in a thick accent. Indeed, this is the Type-66 which was formerly owned by a member of 6th Street, obviously. It's easily the cheapest Type-66 on this list, and there's a pretty good reason for that. Whilst I will praise some of these cars for their immense handling and ability to navigate Night City with both power and ease, this one is a little harder to tame. With 666 horsepower and a top speed of 185, it's not a car with bad stats by any means. Hell, major bonus points for its particular resemblance to a Ford Mustang. That alone easily bumps it up a few spots. Unfortunately, it's then dragged down by how badly it handles corners compared to the rest. I mean, that's probably how it's wound up in our hands to begin with. The 6th Streeter who previously owned it drove into a corpo one night, and they most likely got arrested or killed. The kit style of this one does indeed really show when you start to drive it. A hell of a lot of style, but not really that much substance. Still, if you're a fan of Mustangs and a true American patriot, I think you'll have a lot of fun with this one. TLDR, Cyberpunk's answer to patriotism and Ford Mustangs. One of the best value-for-money Nomad cars out there, the Thorton Little Mule is a tuned-up variant of a regular Thorton Colby. Designed to survive the harsh wastes of the Badlands, this thing comes equipped with tons of extra armor as well as crystal dome windows instead of glass. We can buy it at the convenient location of the Sunset Motel for a mere 35,000 eddies. At that price, you'll get a vehicle with top speeds of 189 miles per hour for me and an insane 369 horsepower. Now, granted, this won't accelerate as fast as a supercar or many of the sports cars, but for longer journeys across the Badlands, that armor weighing you down will likely be more of a help than a hindrance. Hell, the same goes for driving through the more gang-infested territories of Night City. Sure, it may not be the best city car by a long shot, but it's a very serious contender when it comes to being the best value-for-money vehicle in the Badlands. Indeed, any visit to the Aldecaldos will tell you that this is one of their more popular vehicles, providing everything they need to survive sandstorms sandstorms, gunfights, and long journeys. This one was found by a friend of Dakota's abandoned in a ditch and seemingly beyond repair. Though, turns out, these cars, like many of the more simple ones in this game, don't die so easily. It was quickly fixed, tuned up, and purely designed for the practical tasks of surviving the Badlands. Entropism at its finest. This car scraps all style for pure necessity, which funnily enough, I find to be rather stylistic. TLDR, what doesn't kill you simply makes you stronger. Whilst the Rattler may be the superior starting vehicle, who's to say that one can't take that design and improve it yet again? Meet the Galena Gecko, a 41 grand car which can be purchased from Dakota over here in the eastern Badlands. For your hard-earned money, you get 365 horsepower, very decent acceleration, and a top speed of 187. Like so many other Badlands cars, this thing is clearly designed to face whatever scenario you can throw at it, with crystal dome windows providing privacy, but I think more importantly in this case, extra protection. If we look at the database entry, it says, quote, "Folks in the wasteland used to laugh at the sight of a Galena, but no one's laughing now," end quote. Now, I don't know about you, but I choose to see this as a reference to that line from Joker during his stand-up comedy piece. Maybe the bright red and green colours could be Joker-esque as well, who knows? But the best thing about this car though, without a doubt, is how it handles on off-road terrain. To be honest, I feel it handles better overall off-road than it does on, and is definitely one of the top cars I would choose to take when traversing the Badlands. Maybe not as sleek as Scorpion's Apollo bike, but certainly safer. TLDR, third evolution of the Thorton Galena. The next car on the list needs no introduction. That's because Delamain is introduced to us during the heist and is essential to the beginning and end of that mission. Following said introduction, Act 2 kicks off with a sprawling mass of Delamain side quests scattered around Night City. Completing all of the epistrophe gigs as well as the final Delamain quest, our end reward will be our own Delamain cab, whose personality will be dictated by your choice at the end of the mission. You could end up with Excelsior or Delamain Jr., who are pretty much the same, more softly spoken Delamain variants. Now, whilst the choices leading up to these two are arguably the more moral ones, the best choice in my opinion is to save the original Delamain. This gives our cab an original Delamain personality, but with zero memories, resulting in an ongoing string of dialogue where you and Delamain talk philosophy every time you drive this car.
Yeah? Any reason why?
I've made a breakthrough in my research and development that will allow the Delamain network to spread its wings.
That does sound exceptional.
I won't bore you with the details. After all, no one likes a chatty driver.
In the way Skippy is a companion gun then, I'd say Delamain is your companion car, which bumps him up this list by quite a bit. The car is well worth driving every day or two to hear some very interesting pieces of dialogue. I personally love exploring the philosophical depth in this game, and for that reason I love our Delamain conversations. As far as the car's stats go, it's not terrible to drive either, with 333 horsepower and a top speed of 155. It's also supposed to be a vehicle with very good defenses, as showcased during the heist. And now, driving it properly, whilst I'm yet to witness any combat mode, I have zero complaints. Something I'd love to hear your thoughts on though is whether or not you see Delamain as a sentient being. I look forward to reading your philosophical debates in the comments. TLDR, open the cab bay doors, Del. Next up, naming a car after one of H.P. Lovecraft's most famous eldritch entities and letting it loose on the streets of Night City. What could possibly go wrong? Cthulhu is yet another of the Type-66 variants, this time sporting a dark and dominating design. Honestly, all the Type-66s are fairly similar, though I felt the handling of this one in particular left a little to be desired. With a top speed of 185 and 666 horsepower, but an inability to really turn at speeds well below that. Then again, Cthulhu ain't exactly a being that can be fully comprehended, let alone controlled, so I guess it fits the character. You can get this one of two ways. We can either let Peter Sampson die during The Beast in Me, wherein you'll afterwards have to buy it from Regina Jones at a pretty steep 76 grand. Or you can take what is definitely the better option for all parties involved and convince Claire to spare Peter's life. It's quite a delicate process though, involving dialogue options back in the penultimate race, but well worth doing. Basically, refuse to help kill Peter here, then later on in the final race, just keep choosing the options to stall Claire, before finally telling her to let him live. This won't damage your relationship with Claire at all, and after waiting for several days, Peter will text you gifting Cthulhu as a thank you. There's not even a need to pick it up, and it'll just appear in our vehicle inventory. We'll be 76 grand richer with more money for other cars. Either way though, this car will crash and burn during the race, only to be resurrected, fit and ready to wreak terror on the streets of Night City. TLDR, Fingli Mogul Nafa Cthulhu Rilye Waga Nagal Fatagam. I hope I pronounced that right. I did get an A at Welsh in school, so you know. To me, the Shion MZ2 is one of the best street-level cars in the game. By that, I mean it performs very well, whilst also feeling down-to-earth enough that any successful street kid could own one. For 57k at the parking lot near V's apartment, we'll get 482 horsepower and a top speed of 185. The style over substance design of this car, however, does sometimes seep through a bit. It's fast, yes, but road traction leaves a little to be desired. Even on reasonably straight roads, I found myself losing control in this one more often than I'm comfortable with, and it's clearly a car for street kids who want to show off with a bigger bark than bite. According to Regina, that may have been the error of the previous owner, who exercised the gas pedal just a little too much, resulting in a crash. Hopefully, you can learn from their mistake and not repeat history in this car. That is, even if you buy it in the first place, because there's a souped up version for not much more money, which eliminates pretty much all the negatives this one has. We'll get to that in a bit. TLDR, the guy that always over revs at traffic lights. The Quartz Bandit is a Badlands car which can be acquired from Dakota Smith for 69,000 eddies. You can also get it rewarded by Rogue if you don't help Pan Am defeat Nash. But since the Widowmaker is one of my favourite guns and we get that by defeating Nash, no way am I saving 69 grand on this car and not getting the Widowmaker. Even still, that's a somewhat steep price, and I'm a little divided over whether or not it's worth it. The interior, for starters, does have some nice bells and whistles, telling us all sorts of stats, but feels a little cramped. The story behind this one is that some city boy bought it, bet that he'd win a race in it, and then, due to an inability to control this thing, lost the car to Dakota. Driving it, I can see why he struggled. Without a doubt, this thing belongs on a rally track, performing brilliantly with its 364 horsepower on straighter roads and reaching speeds of 183 with me. Turning into any kind of corner though is not gonna work out the way that you expect. Indeed, being inspired by the Kitsch era, this thing places style over substance, appearing from the outset to perform brilliantly, which it does in many cases, but very ironically, by cutting a ton of corners figuratively, the car massively suffers in cutting literal corners. It also doesn't feature any kind of boot, meaning accessing your stash on the go is a no-no with this one. A shame, because it's brilliantly suited to getting around the much more spread out Badlands region. And if you're very lucky, like I was when recording this clip, you might be able to make the car do a somersault or two. Overall though, at the asking price, I'd suggest only rushing to buy this if orange is your favourite colour. TLDR, Speed Demon, yes. Steer Demon, no. Yet another Type 66 next. The basic 640 TS doesn't have a nickname and isn't quite the fastest on show, clocking out at about 184 and sporting 555 horsepower. What it lacks in speed though, it absolutely makes up for in handling, and I was pretty surprised to realise that this is one of my favourite Type 66s to drive. I really like the Ford Mustang style look of these cars, but their inability to turn corners at speed without smashing into walls or worse pedestrians was becoming quite a problem. This one actually has surprisingly good turning capabilities, and across my time driving it, I turned about 90% of my corners successfully. Again, a very surprising, but nonetheless very welcome result. This one is awarded after completing all of the gigs set by Dino in the city centre, so you likely won't unlock this one until fairly late in the game, unless you have a habit of grinding those gigs as soon as you enter a new area. So technically it's a free car, in the same sense as the other mission reward vehicles, and a more minimalist design compared to some of the uniques was actually a breath of fresh air for me. It looks like a nice car, and being able to get around without crashing every 30 seconds was a virtue I'd seriously underappreciated before unlocking this. TLDR, sometimes basic, is better. Now, this next one may be familiar to a great many of you, having been one of the poster child cars on a great deal of Cyberpunk promotional material. The Turbo R VTEC may look very similar to the R740 from earlier, but the difference is staggeringly obvious once you drive it. So much so that the game itself describes comparing these two as like comparing a diamond to a chunk of coal. Sure, they're made of the same stuff, but the way this one is put together is just on a whole nother level. I mean, sure, you likely won't exceed 190 in this thing, which isn't much faster than its base variant, but with an extra 260 horsepower, that's 740 as opposed to 480, you are gonna reach that speed a hell of a lot quicker, and boy does it show. I mean, even just the sound that the turbo makes when accelerating is sometimes better than listening to any radio station. Sometimes. To get this one then is reasonably simple. Just complete the gig Life's Work down in the Glen, which involves stealing this Thorton Colby pickup from 6th Street and returning it to Jake Estevez, a genius car techie on the run who wants this much more mediocre car back. As thanks, he'll later reward you with the Turbo R VTEC, which is acquirable through the side mission Sex on Wheels. Basically, just drive to this garage and pick the car up. Now, spoiler alert, but the Rayfield Caliburn is easily the fastest car in this game by quite a bit. It accelerates insanely fast and is completely unrivaled, but accelerating in the VTEC, I think, is arguably more enjoyable. I mean, just listen to that engine. And where I complained about cornering in the regular 740, I'm pleased to report that cornering is slightly better in the VTEC. Still far from perfect, and it's not ideal for the windy streets of Night City, but on the more main roads, it'll get you around just fine, and sound like an utter monster when doing so. TLDR, the epitome of speed and power. I've praised the Rayfield Caliburn as the Batmobile of Cyberpunk 2077 before, and I'll do so again later, but the Quadra 66 Avenger, I think, is just as worthy of that title on aesthetics alone. With less of a Bugatti Veyron and more of a Ford Mustang approach, this one shouts out to the more down-to-earth looking renditions of the vehicle, specifically the one seen in the latest movie with Robert Pattinson. In fact, had I thought of this before, I'd definitely have used it as a backup vehicle in my Mercman build video. This one can be bought at Corpo Plaza, where Mercman probably lived, for 75,000 eddies. Funnily enough, Dino gives zero details on where he got this one from, so my headcanon is that it's another car which was owned by the mysterious Mercman before he mysteriously disappeared. The neo-kit style ensures it packs plenty of style and substance, and with 777 horsepower and a top speed of 190 to back that up, there's definitely a lot going for this one. Looking at the interior, we're greeted with a flashy LED display, which Mercman no doubt appreciated when driving his spare car. According to Dino, if you don't buy this one, you're lame. And why wouldn't you? It's fast in both top speed and acceleration, it makes a beautiful sound, and even at high speed, it corners excellently. I'm not gonna lie, I love all the Type 66s in one way or another, and for this one, it's the feeling of badass vigilante that you get whilst driving it. TLDR, it is to Batmobiles what second monitors are to PCs. One of the absolute most powerful cars in the game is without a doubt the Herrera Outlaw GTS. Manufactured between 2072 and 2074, and in the neo-kit style no less, this one is a neat combination of both substance and style. With all-wheel drive and 775 horsepower, you're looking at one of the best combinations of power and control that the game has to offer. In this thing, you can easily take sharp corners at high speeds, and whilst traction will occasionally fluctuate on doing this, it is almost always possible to regain control if you have the swaying space either side. With a top speed of 190, it's easily up there with the likes of Erendite, albeit at a cheaper price. Sure, 92 grand isn't exactly a small amount still to most people, but for the cars of this level, you can't really expect much less. Dino Dinovic tells us that there's only about 1,000 left in the world and a mere 10 in Night City, so we're definitely paying a rarity premium here too. And it's only thanks to level 30 plus street cred that we're even given the opportunity to buy this thing. Overall, whilst there's definitely better cars out there, this one stands out to me on the basis that it still feels like a real-life supercar. The actual glass windows, exquisite interior, and the sleek but not too futuristic design make this car feel closer to home than, say, the Erendite, Caliburn, or any of the Badlands vehicles. It reminds me, in fact, of the Rimac Concept 1 that Richard Hammond crashed a few years ago. Not in appearance entirely, but in the way it gives off that cutting-edge car of the future, which at the same time doesn't feel too futuristic. Though I'm sure you're all going to point out other cars that this is way more similar to, and that's fine. I look forward to hearing what they are. TLDR, drive fast, and don't worry. Unless maybe you're Richard Hammond. As far as Quadra Type-66s go, the Javelina is the one for nomads, if not just the best entirely. Sporting an armoured and tuned up look, this car comes with all the bells and whistles which we've come to expect from vehicles designed for the Badlands at this point. And with an absolutely mental 1000 horsepower, we're also currently looking at one of the most powerful cars in the game. And boy does it feel it. Both in sound and purely the way that it drives, you can feel there's a lot of weight behind this thing, what with the armour and everything. Yet its handling is second to none when it comes to nomad cars. Sure, it's not the fastest the Badlands has to offer, the Coyote's got that one, but with the speed of 190 for this thing, I'm not sure you can really complain. And if I had to choose one Badlands car for a race with any kind of twists and turns, then hands down, it'd be this one. Bear in mind though, Dakota ain't gonna sell it cheap. Coming in at a whopping 99,000 eddies, it was personally done up by her perfectionist brother-in-law. It's so valuable to her in fact that she's offering it to V simply on the principle that it's someone she knows. So if you have the 30 street cred and a lot of spare eddies lying around, I would highly recommend this car. It is, in my opinion, the best Type 66 in the game, both in terms of stats and appearance, and will almost always be my go-to when selecting this type of vehicle. TLDR, baddest motherfucker in the Badlands. The Porsche 911 is truly a special car. The only one in the game straight up ripped from real life, it's found during the quest Chipping In and you'll retrieve the key from Grayson. Then, lowering the shipping container and pulling back the cover, we'll unveil one of Johnny's most prized possessions.
My ride. Hop in. I'll even let you drive.
The Porsche is without a doubt the most unique vehicle in the game and the only one you can drive the streets in and be sure you won't bump into another one. This is because it's a 1977 car, making it by far the oldest in the game at a ripe old age of 100. It's obviously been kept in pristine condition all this time and was left in cold storage for decades. With 296 horsepower and a top speed of 160, it's by no means the fastest in the game, but it does accelerate beautifully. And if we take a look at the dash, I just think it's really nice to see a much more familiar looking sight in the form of dials. But not only does this car feel like a piece of home in a dystopian world, but the appearance is arguably the most iconic of all the game's vehicles. It's even had a replicant made in real life and has also cropped up in GTA Online. You can even take it on the date with Rogue and she'll actually make a comment on it.
This Johnny's Porsche? Where'd you get it?
That's what was in the container. The one Grayson was talking about.
Okay. Got a lot of memories in this car.
Since this is the same car that Johnny and Rogue used to date in. For the most part though, if you want to get that feeling of driving a classic car whose iconicness is up there with the DeLorean, then this is literally a free gift that you should absolutely make sure to pick up. In fact, the devs seem to love this one so much themselves that lead vehicle artist Jakub Przyspolowski, sorry if I butchered that, has his own signature engraved onto the dash. TLDR, realist real-life Easter egg in the history of real-life Easter eggs. We now come to the top 3. Erendite is a car with literally so much good to say about it that I don't even know where to begin. How about we start with the name itself? Taken from the Sword of Sir Lancelot from the Legend of King Arthur, the Erendite is a car canonically built by British company Rayfield. And not to be biased towards my own nation, but much like Bond cars, it's clear in this case that nobody does it better. It makes me feel sad for the rest, but I'd go so far as to say that nobody does it half as good as you, save for obviously number 1. What's more, Erendite is also the name of the best silver sword which we can get in all 3 Witcher games from the Lady of the Lake. In fact, without going too off topic here, if you've played all 3 of those games sequentially like I have, then getting Erendite returned to you having held it in previous entries is one of the most poetic moments of the series. Suffice it to say that I think Erendite is the perfect name for this car, though it is also rightfully the single most expensive thing you could possibly purchase. Coming in at 155k, this car affords you 900 950 horsepower, a top speed of 190, and crystal dome windows. Sure, that speed is matched and surpassed by several other vehicles on this list, but what this one also has is seriously good road acceleration. Again though, that can be matched by the likes of the Coyote. So then where this car ultimately wins out for me is in the style half of the neo-kitsch design. I mean, this one was literally the former property of the ambassador of Argentina, and during the Street Kid intro, we're told that only 4 exist in the whole of Night City. I'm not sure how true that is now though, because I drive past these things fairly often. Still, the fact that the insanely rich Kara Eurodyne opts to drive one of these demonstrates just the level we've ascended to when we ourselves acquire one. Indeed, for a Corpo V, this may as well be the biggest indication that they've earned their way back to and are now well beyond the height of their initial glory. So yes, whilst the base stats are indeed nothing to gawk at, this car's reputation is what's boosted it for me all the way to number 2. TLDR, Erendites are forever. Arguably the best Badlands car, the Shion Coyote will set you back 77 grand when you head over here in the far Badlands for it. Not a bad price when you consider the 570 horsepower, brilliant acceleration and handling, as well as the top speed of 199. This is indeed the top sports car for those wanting to live on the edge of society where the roads aren't so smooth. Its entropism design makes sure to cut out all but the essentials, yet despite this, the car still looks cool as hell, in a Mad Max kind of way. You'll only need 20 street cred to buy this one, and to be honest, by the time you've come out here having already racked up the 77k needed, you'll most likely have that street cred anyway. I spoke fairly highly of cars like the Gecko and Little Mule, and hell, I still do. They're a lot cheaper and they get around nicely. But compared to this, no. Just no. If you can afford to save for a while longer, then this is where it's at, with both the database and Dakota describing its insane ability to cut across off-road terrain like it's nothing. And indeed, I found that I was reaching speeds of 180 on bumpy desert fairly easily. Will this be my go-to Badlands vehicle from now on? Probably. Is it worth the money? Probably. Though bear in mind, you can acquire a red and grey one for free as a gift from Saul. Though I'd highly recommend not doing it this way, since it involves going behind Pan Am's back during the quest with a little help from my friends. By ratting her out to Saul, you will be fully forced to cut ties with her and thus be locked out of the rest of the Aldecaldo questline and one whole ending. They will disappear from the map, or rather they should. If you actually go to the new camp, they're sort of floating and glitching around there. Anyway, even for a car as badass as this, that is not worth it. Especially when we can just go and buy a version which is straight up identical in everything bar color. TLDR handles better off-road than many cars do on-road. What do you get when you take the fastest vehicle in the game, slap on insanely good acceleration and brilliantly intuitive handling at high speeds, then also go and make it available completely free? I'll tell you what you get. You get the best damn freaking car in Cyberpunk 2077. The Rayfield Caliburn boasts a ridiculous 1660 horsepower and an easy-to-reach top speed of 211. The engine sound is recorded from a real-life Lexus LFA, it looks like a Bugatti Veyron, and it's just an all-round badass. You can get the free Merkman Black one from this tunnel down in the Badlands after hitting 40 street cred. I've covered that several times in previous videos. Or you can get this nice white and gold one from the city centre docks for an infinitely steeper 127k. Having done most of my driving for this game in the black Caliburn before, I gotta say, finally purchasing this one did give me a nice feeling of similar but different, though it's an expensive and completely unnecessary purchase if you're tight on eddies. The only criticism I'd give to this car, in fact, is that it's just too good. By being the best in pretty much every sector, there's way less reason to try out all the other wonderful cars in this game, which is a crying shame, since a lot of effort has clearly gone into making each one. At the time of creating this video, use case for vehicles is almost exclusively just getting from A to B, and I'm kind of hoping that when we do finally get vehicle combat, this car will go up like a tinderbox after a few hits. At least then, there'll be some legitimate reason to regularly switch cars, with slower but more armored ones being key to surviving vehicular combat scenarios. To round this video off then, let's return in the Caliburn to that same camping spot we went with the Supron right at the beginning, to see how much more remarkably easy it is to climb this hill. Yeah, that is significantly easier. Kind of. I will say the Badlands actually is the only place this wouldn't be my first car. Give me the Coyote or Javelina out here any day. Right then, let's unpack the Butte and set up camp. Ah, we can't, the boot we can't open. Right. And on that terrible disappointment, it's time to end. Thank you very much for watching this long-ass review/ranking of all the cars in Cyberpunk 2077. Comment below your favorite car in this game and why, as well as any funny driving experiences you've had along the way. This one took me a very long time to make, and I really appreciate that you've stuck around until the end. I figured this video marks an achievement in long-form content creation for me, and is as good a time as any to announce the launch of my Patreon page. To anyone interested in going the extra mile to support the channel, you can donate from as little as £1 a month from the link in the description or the channel about page. Whilst I've had a few sponsorship offers, none have really been my thing, and I'm determined to only take sponsorships on for products I genuinely like or already use. Patreon then will allow me to maintain that freedom with sponsorships, whilst also providing more breathing room to create longer form content like this. Please though, only consider pledging if you can afford it. Anyway, thank you again so much for watching. I'm Sam Brown, and I'll see you very soon in another video.